let's look forward 10 years to 2035. I mean, the idea we have strategy 2030 and vision 2030, that's only 5 years away. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I remember when strategy 2030 was deep future thinking, and now we're almost there. So let's say 2035, strategy 2035. Are Western modern cities like we see them going to be the future, or is it going to be the Nairobis and the Cairos and the Bangkoks and the Dakars that are going to be the true model of the city of the future, and the Jakartas? You know, I mean, Nadine, I mean, and it's true. I mean, we know it from Jakarta, but for example, when I go now to, let's say, Bangkok, or I go to, certainly to Lagos, but to pretty well any city, actually that's not true. It was true in Belgrade as well. If people want to meet me, they've got to come to the hotel. Because if I try and meet you, that takes up half of my day in the traffic, and I don't know if I'm going to arrive. And it is just dysfunctional. I almost never now go out in the evenings when I'm in major cities because of the traffic. It's just not a functional way of using my time. If you want to meet me, we come here, we will walk down to the local restaurant. But to say, I'll come and see you on the other side of the city, doesn't make sense. So are we seeing now the split between the Tokyos and the Vancouvers and the Genevas on one side, and the Beiruts and the Dakars and the Lagoses and the Bangkoks on the other side, Nadine? And can we maybe use Jakarta as almost a case study? Because of course Indonesia is now moving out of Jakarta to build a new capital. From your experience, is there lessons that we can learn, but we must learn in terms of what the city of the future might look like?
Interesting question, David. I think I'm not sure whether the notion of cities as they are in different parts of the world, whether they're necessarily going to change that much. I can't see London, for example, being a fundamentally different city than it is now in about 10 years' time or so. I can't say the Singapores or the Vancouvers are changing. I think where we will see changes, and these are probably going to be happening all across the globe, some of the developments that Zoran has talked about earlier. So that interface between human technology and the institution, I think for me, technologies is probably going to play a very, very important role in the future. So the way in which we as citizens connect with one another, how we connect with institutions, the way in which transport systems are managed, and so on. So I think when we're looking at Singapore as an example of a smart city, I think it's a very, very good example of a smart city. I can see that a lot of cities around the globe are probably going to follow this example and are going to use and implement some of the lessons learned. And I believe that when it comes to making our cities more digital, for example, the pandemic has been a very important driving factor in that, because obviously anything digital has become a solution to a vast problem that we had because of social distancing at the time. So I believe that there are trends that we are going to see across the globe. And just going back to the importance of communities and the connectedness of institutions with communities. Again, I do believe that we're going to see that Western cities will probably look some of the lessons learned from cities in the global south, and are going to look at how communities can be supported better. And a few months ago, I went to a conference on emergency planning, for example, and an ex-student of ours who is now working for the British Red Cross has talked about his work in London with communities in London and assisting communities to become more flood resilient. Now, that is a prime example of what you would see in Indonesia. And these are not things that I have seen, say, 20 years ago when I first came to the UK. I certainly haven't seen any of this when I first started working here at the university. So I think there are lessons from the Global South, which are actually informing the work here, and also which are going to inform policies and institutional working within Western communities. So, I think that's what I'm going to pause here, but hopefully that gives an answer to your question.
I want to bring something, Zoran. I'm going to come to you because, again, you've seen this and you're involved in this in policy development and capability development across the Balkans. But I want to bring something in, which I was involved. Let me just bring up if I can bring up a slide here. Yeah, that should be it. Hopefully you can see my slide there. This is something I was involved in. So basically, the Institute of Engineering and Technology, I was on the editorial board, and they said to me, would I be interested in a project around infrastructure, risk and resilience, managing complexity and uncertainty in developing cities? And I said, oh my God, I'd love to. I'd love to. You can see it says March 2014, so exactly 10 years ago. I said, managing complexity and uncertainty in developing cities. I would love to. And they sent me this, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm out. Because if you think that picture is a picture of a developing city, then we have a conceptual difference. And these people are, they're smart people. They're really interested. They're committed and they're engaged. They didn't just pick that picture. They spent a lot of time designing this. And yet I think that is an exemplar of the conceptual gap, the cognizance gap between what we conceive of as managing complexity and uncertainty in developing cities and then putting that on the map. That's not a developing city. A developing city is your Lagoses and your Beiruts and your your Bangkoks, which have basically created a monster because of what they've done is they've had modernity, which basically means cars and expanded urban area spaces, but they haven't had infrastructure development to go along with it. And I just that picture for me encapsulates some of the cognitive dissonance that we see around when we discuss what an emerging city looks like, especially if we're having that conversation from the 16th floor of the Hilton Hotel, in wherever it might be in the world. Zoran Kekovic, let's bring you in, sir. Your thoughts.
David, you initiated debate how good stories could be transferred from developed cities, developed world, into less developed cities, less developed, or to Nairobi, to Belgrade, to other cities. I think yes, investment in hard infrastructure is very important to improve the citizens' lives. But culture is the inherent motivation for the development of smart cities. For example, in the process of applying AI constructions of smart cities, human work, intelligence can also be used in different aspects, such as education, travel, and cultural integration. Let me say, you mentioned Japan, David. Let me mention one example from the beginning of this year. You remember a plane crash in Japan in 2nd January. The question is how almost 400 passengers managed to escape of the Japanese national company, burning plane. Could you imagine 4 people per second? The response is cultural cluster. The first play, discipline. Leaving their belongings behind was the main reason for the rapid evacuation of passengers. Before the plane burst into flames on the runway at Tokyo's airport, as Aviation Express said. And the second reason is exercise and training. Aviation Express and crew members told the BBC that the operation was successful because the crew consistently applied train protocols and because passengers behaved well and followed instructions of the cabin crew. So the cultural cluster is at the very beginning of all of the solution of all problems, including city resilience, I think.
Can I just come in there? I've just looked it up because I wanted the details. It was Korean Flight 801, 1997. Basically, the captain made a wrong decision on landing, and the co-pilot was, because of the language culture, the language of deference in your language, the co-pilot was not able to tell the pilot, that's wrong, stop, do not do that. Even though it was absolutely clear to the co-pilot that we're literally going into the ground. And yet it was, excuse me, sir, do you think that it might be something that might be open to consideration, et cetera, et cetera? When we're put under pressure, we revert back to our natural culture or our natural language. For example, that we're under pressure, we go back to our natural language, our natural culture. And if it is a culture of deference, we've spoken about conformity. For example, Tokyo, we had somebody here just saying that they're theoretically in Tokyo. I spent 5 years in Tokyo, so I know Tokyo very, very well. But that conformity means that you're often lacking adaptability or agility when under stress. And therefore, what I would question is, are our cities and our city management and our city managers and our national managers, are they too tight, too confined by this is the way we do it? And therefore do not have the openness and adaptability and agility that we are going to require in this coming generation. And sometimes you have to be comfortable with uncertainty. You have to be comfortable with a certain level of chaos. You have to be comfortable with a certain level of not knowing what the answer is. One of the problems in COVID was there was no clear answer about, do we go to lockdown, do we not go into lockdown? And therefore we were dealing with a situation which was fundamentally uncertain, and we did not have guidelines to deal with it. And I think that those are the issues we are going to see. I mean, if you ask, is our world moving towards, is our world fundamentally anthropotic? Is it moving towards more control and structure and form? Or is it basically seeing those forms breaking down and those structures breaking down? And we're moving to where chaos is the normality. And we see that, for example, in cities underwater, where, flooding, the sea levels are rising, and it is now normal for cities to flood. It is normal for cities to fail. It is normal for infrastructure to fail. God forbid, we haven't yet had a major satellite communications failure. It's called a black sky, black start event. But in those situations, who's more resilient? It is the villagers, and it is the people who are not systems dependent. And those of us who are systems dependent are going to have a really tough time of it.